recognize what we're fighting around right now, we're fighting for right now, is not just the next election or the election after that. We're fighting for our right to be here for the rest of this century and beyond. So don't mistakenly about a little issue about something called privilege. Don't mistake this to be a little issue about, well, do we talk about enslavement as an employment program giving Black folks skills? We need to understand that this is about taking away our ability to narrate our lives. It's about taking away our ability to talk about inequality. It's about our inability to talk about the continuing ways that racism shapes every aspect of our existence. If they can take away our ability to just speak the reality, how are we going to be able to transform our reality? So look, when we know that people come after something that's important to us, when they come after our vote, they come after our voices, they come after our narratives, they come after our history, they're coming after us. So it doesn't matter if the frame they put on it is critical race theory. It doesn't matter if the thing that they say they're against is wokeness. It doesn't matter if the thing that they're saying they're protecting is their feelings. Recognize they are coming after our right to say who we are, what our reality is, in order to prevent us from actually doing everything that we need to do to make our lives worthy of this democracy and to make this democracy the true multiracial democracy that we know we have a right to make it become for all of us.
Where the organ is at? Where the organ is at up in here? My God. Give it up for Reverend Dr. Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. I mean, they don't know the difference between CRT and OPP. So, Brother Hewitt, sexual chocolate. Let me ask you a question. So, when we think about Santayana, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it, living in what Gore Vidal called the United States of Amnesia, right? And we can say Barbara Streisand supplies the theme song. What's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. It's a deliberate dismemory. It's what Hannah Arendt called a defactualization, not a creation of fact-based, truth-centered consciousness. Tell us the consequence to American democracy of denying entire swaths of our history and teaching limited aspects, even of enslavement. Now, if you want to teach skills that Black people learn, killing white slave masters is one of them. Not sure that that's going to be on the agenda, right? Poisoning the water stream, sharing bodily liquids in the greens. So talk to us about the erasure of entire swaths of history and the consequence, the negative consequence that has on history, not only for Black folk, but for the masses of America.
Right. Well, thank you, Brother Dyson. The negative consequence, not just on history, but on our daily lives and existence.
Mm-hmm.
You heard Professor Crenshaw talk about how there are laws, like in Oklahoma, where you can't teach about the Tulsa Race Massacre. You also can't teach about the Trail of Tears, right? Because our struggles are linked. But they're afraid of indoctrination, so they say, but this is actually a massive effort at brainwashing, a massive effort, because the way Professor Crenshaw said it, when we look at TV, when we read books, when we watch movies, you think Black folks are a whole different people than we know ourselves to be. That's what our brothers and sisters from other continents say. Well, I didn't know it was like this. I didn't know who you were because all I saw was what you saw. But they also use this revisionist history to create structures that disadvantage Black folks and advantage other people who have power. So we litigated, we argued the affirmative action case in the Supreme Court. And it ain't over because there's more cases coming. And we're still litigating those too, at the Lawyers Committee and other organizations. But think about legacy admissions. Think about legacy admissions. That's the functional equivalent of the grandfather clause in voting rights. Remember that? If your grandfather and them could vote, then, well, you can vote too. Right. Well, if your grandfather and them attended Princeton or Harvard or whatever school it was, then you can go too. And whose grandfather was able to do that? Or great grandfather, what happened, right? So they use revisionist history to create structures that on the surface seem neutral, race neutral, power neutral, but they're anything but. And if we allow those revisionist history structures to define our reality, we are running a race with one hand tied behind our back and one knee capped out. That's how we're forced to run a race. So we have to run a race with full knowledge. You're not going to hit the road without knowing where you're going. You're not going to drive without being able to see. That's what we have to be able to do. And this whole revisionist history is designed to blind us not only to historical realities and present realities, but future possibilities. They say affirmative action and all this stuff is a handout, what have you. That's what revisionist history tells us. But real history says affirmative action, first of all, was never going to save us in its entirety. But we fought for it because we know it's not a handout, it's what we deserve to be seen for our whole and true selves. You can't look at me and say, that's just a man. You're going to look at me and say, it's a black man. That's a handsome black man. You didn't say handsome. But there are people who like to not see things. There are people say, well, I don't see race. See, I voted for Obama. Yes, you say I don't see race because I voted for a black man. Yes, you see race. And it's okay. You know what? I want to be seen. I demand to be seen. And you do too. So if we can see and appreciate each other for our whole selves, we can undo this revisionist system. We can undo this effort to not just whitewash, but to brainwash us and every American in this country.
Thank you, sir. Excellent. Sister Tweedy, you name your children Stokely and Evers. So we know linguistically and in nomenclature, you have insisted upon a historical acknowledgement in the very naming of your children to extend a trajectory of emancipation, liberation, and freedom. One of the arguments made in terms of banning books, well, it makes our children uncomfortable, as Professor Crenshaw referred to that, as if discomfort is not the basis for education. If you ain't uncomfortable with your ignorance, you ain't gonna never learn. But the discomfort of white children as a bellwether and a benchmark for what is acceptable in our society. Talk to us as a woman who's been deeply involved in both economic reconstruction and educational access. Talk to us about why it's important to fight against the banning of these books and to suggest that parents who stand against reading about Rosa Parks or reading about what happened in New Orleans are on the wrong side of history.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Dyson. And what I say when people ask, well, what's going to happen to the children? How the children going to feel? I look at them and I say, you don't have kids, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have an 8-year-old Stokely and I have a 5-year-old Evers. And if, Saturday Night Live was going to put on a skit of a woke school, that's the school my kids go to. They're learning about everything from the time they're 4 years old, and I watch them. You know what kids do? Black kids, white kids, all kids. They don't take on the past of others. They don't look at us and say, well, what did you do, mama? And what did he do out there? What they say is, this is about us. And just like when they're learning math or they're learning reading or they're learning writing or anything else, they're doing it together, not against one another. So I don't think they have kids, Dr. Dyson. But what I want us to be thinking about as we're asking these questions about the pillars of our democracy is what that democracy is actually upholding. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And none of that is possible, as we all know, without the economic power and freedom and opportunity to be able to actually live those lives of liberty and freedom. So as we're looking and feeling and hearing and fighting these attacks, we need to notice something. Supreme Court on affirmative action. The 13 states attorneys general letters telling the Fortune 100 companies cease and desist. The case brought against the Fearless Fund. Those are all cuts against economic pathways to opportunity, to progress, and to wealth building. When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, in this country, the Black community held less than 1% of our nation's worth. 150 years later, after a civil rights movement, after a Reconstruction, after the national response to the murder of George Floyd, that percent of wealth held by Black community in this country has budged by only 2%. So we have to ask ourselves as we're thinking about what we're fighting back against right now, were we okay with how things looked before the affirmative action case in this country? Still, your average Black graduate from college was earning less and amassing less wealth than your average white high school dropout. With all of the corporate diversity programs, DEI efforts, there is only one Black woman CEO in the Fortune 500. So yes, we have to hold the floor. We also can't just fight defense right now. We have to fight offense. We can't look to rebuild what we had as if those pathways were getting us where we needed to go. We need to build pathways that are highways, that are runways, that are autobahns to economic prosperity and to wealth building. And so as we're in this conversation about what it looks like to preserve, let's just make sure we're also looking at what does that ceiling look like? What does that North Star look like? And not let us spend all of our energy thinking about how we make sure we don't use the floor, but that we are able to fight defense and offense at the same time, so that what we come out with for Stokely Forever is for all of our children looks dramatically different than what it's looked like for any of us today.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Very powerful. We want to recognize Representative Troy Carter from Louisiana. I think Tisha James wants me to say that he may be Jay-Z's cousin. I'm not sure. Mr. Carter. Ms. Parsons, talk to us. We've heard mention about the suing of the Fearless Fund. I love that title, Fearless Fund. It just stands for everything in one phrase that we attempt to articulate as minoritized and racialized communities. But I think about affirmative action. I think about the fact that the GI Bill built the white middle class. There would be no suburbanization without the giving of a mortgage, access to a job, and access to education. That's the Holy Trinity. And the very people who have benefited from affirmative action, think about the book When Affirmative Action Was White by Ira Katz Nelson, a Columbia University professor, to lay that out. Talk to us about the disparity in recognition and perception of the benefits that white brothers and sisters and others have received versus the relatively paltry benefits that have accrued to us, and then talk about the suing of the Fearless Fund.
Absolutely. So let me just start by saying that there are three things that make this world go round: money, power, and love. And we as Black folks, we got a whole lot of love. But I'm going to tell you what we don't have. We don't have enough power, and we damn sure don't have enough money. The reason why this suit and what we are facing as the Fearless Fund, which is the first venture capital fund founded by women of color, investing in women of color. We are the most founded demographic of entrepreneurs, the most founded. We're starting businesses at a faster rate than anyone, yet the least funded. This is about money. This is about wealth creation. This is about the American dream. And quite frankly, what Ed Blum, who has sued the Fearless Fund, is trying to do is dismantle our economic freedom and our ability to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and experience that which is the American dream. So this is so much bigger than us. We need 1,000 Fearless Funds, but most importantly, we need the capital. So let me tell you how this works in terms of the disparities. In 2022, more than $288 billion was deployed to entrepreneurs to start businesses. That is venture capital, that's seed money to start those businesses. Of that $288 billion, less than half of 1%, $0.8 to be exact, went to women of color. So Black, Latina, Native, Asian American. 0.13%, let me say that again, 0.13% went to Black women. So when you look at these disparities, knowing that we comprise more than 20% of the US population, yet are receiving as Black women 0.13% of the dollars, and as women of color as a total and a collective, 0.39. It is abysmal. And what this money allows these entrepreneurs to do, hire employees, change and transform communities. Because we know when it comes to diversity, Pew did some research years ago that suggests that 80% of white Americans in this country have networks that are 100% white. 80% of white Americans in this country have networks that are 100% white. If you are Black or brown in this country, though, you are 8, 9, 10 times more likely to have completely diverse networks of all races, all ethnicities. That's why this is so important, because if you can diversify the investors, those who are writing the checks, you can diversify the investments, and we can create economic freedom and progress for all. So that, my friends, is why this lawsuit is so incredibly important. He has already taken away our affirmative action in higher education. He has already gone after for diversity legislation in California. He is coming after us. He's suing West Point now. He's suing law firms. He's going after the corporations and their DEI initiatives. So this is a very targeted and planned attack, and the time for us to fight back is now.
Amen. Amen. Not sure how much time we have left. Let's just have a round robin very quickly. When you look at the situation, starting with Representative Horsford, when you look at the situation that all of you have brilliantly described, what's the one central thing you think we need to do in order to combat the amnesia, the erosion of opportunity, the denial of history, the unfacting of Black history, and how we assert ourselves, not only politically, but economically and socially? I actually want to build on what Ayana Parsons just discussed with who is standing in the way of this opportunity. She called out the person, Ed Bloom, who's part of a larger coordinated effort behind the lawsuit against Black women entrepreneurship, against students having access to college. He's also behind the effort to strike down Roe versus Wade and women having the freedoms to reproductive justice. Now, because of that quelching and bullying effect, they are now threatening corporate America. You got people like Senator Tom Cotton telling law firms, don't promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we're going to come after you. And as has been stated, these are tools to address historic and systemic racism and discrimination and disparities. They were just tools. So they're the floor, they're not the ceiling. So what we need to be doing in this moment is holding the line, defending our democracy, defending against the attacks that would weaken access to opportunity, as has been discussed. But we also need to cast a larger vision for what it means to be Black and what we can do based on our power, economically, politically. We talked about money, power, and love. While we may not have all the money we need, we have more power than we use economically. We have more power if we combine the resources of our Black mayors and Black county executives and Black state legislators and the CBC together so that we're coordinated, we have a central message, and we mobilize our people. We got to get out of Washington, D.C. and focus on where the people are. That's why we led the Democracy for the People initiative, because when we reach the people and the people know what the plan is, and we mobilize and we know the message and we vote, we win. My brother. Thank you, sir. Now we got 3 minutes for 4 people. Money, power, and love sounds like a lockstep. We love it. So why don't we start with Professor Crenshaw? Come on down.
So we have to recognize exactly how this attack is happening, and we have to inform our fight by realizing that how they've done this is by starting to go after a small thing and then going after the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So when they came after critical race theory, a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't do that.
Right.
That's not about me. We said, look, this isn't about critical race theory.
Right.
This is about anything having to do with racial justice.
Right.
You're going to see really soon that they're not going to stop at a few academics. And surely that is exactly what has happened. So they've gone from critical race theory to going after Black history. They've gone from Black history to going after diversity. They've gone after diversity in higher education to diversity in business. Eventually, their objective is to erase all ability to talk about everything we talked about here.
Right.
So if you wonder what this is they're going after, if you wonder if they're coming after you, if you heard anything up here today that you thought, you know what, that's exactly right. If you heard about the fact that we don't get the same kind of capital, if you heard about the fact that we don't get access to grandfathering in, if you heard about all of these things and you say, that's what race consciousness tells us about our reality, then you are a critical race theorist. They are coming after you.
Yeah.
So there's no pivoting, there's no running. We've got to stand up and fight. We've got to be informed. We've got to know what they're trying to take away from us. And check us out downstairs. We've got all of the books that they're trying to take away from you. If you see concretely what they're trying to take away, then you're going to be more prepared to fight it wherever you see it.
Thank you so much. All right, we got 1 minute left.
We have to reclaim the infrastructure, education, electoral, political, and we have to stand back to back. That's why Samantha and I, Lawyers Committee, Black Economic Alliance, filed briefs to support the Fearless Fund in their lawsuit. That's why we're suing Trump and Patriot Front and the Oath Keepers. Right. We're not going to allow them to take this over. We're going to reclaim the infrastructure every step we can.
Thank you.
And we can't let the fact that they are loud, they are organized, and they are well funded make us think that the people are behind them. We just did a national survey with the Harris poll that found that 81% of Americans of all stripes think that corporate diversity should reflect the racial diversity of this country. 78% said companies should be taking active steps to increase their racial diversity. And this was in August. This is after the affirmative action case. This is when the Fearless Fund case is happening. And that included 75% of white Americans and 67% of Republicans. And what that tells us is that the American public is behind. Those who are bringing these attacks, they're the ones who are out of step. So they're going to come for all of us. It's going to take all of us, and all the people are behind us.
Really quickly. That was wonderful. And I would just say we need not just allies, we need activists that are non-Black. Sometimes we are talking amongst ourselves. We have to use our dollars. We have to have the money. This man has between 770 million up to 1.5 billion backing him. He is unrelenting and will not stop. You cannot fight that without collective wealth.
All right.
Get money.
Sister Parsons, Sister Tweedy, Brother Hewitt, Sister Crenshaw, Brother Horsford. They're bold, they're brilliant, they're beautiful, they're creative, they're your people. Give it up for the Fantastic Five. Give it up one more time. For our version of The Temptations, The Supremes, and Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. Our second panel today is a discussion on democracy. So what's next? We'll talk about protecting the vote, securing fair representation, and ensuring the integrity of our elections. Finally, we'll take up the question raised in the title, what's our strategy and what are the most effective tactics to pursue it in the coming months and years to preserve and strengthen our democracy? To explore these topics, once again, we're blessed with an eminent group of experts and leaders in the field. To begin with, a member of the CBC, our ALC Gala co-chair, the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett. Still Brooklyn. Right. The chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, representing the 7th District of Alabama, Princeton's proud graduate, Congresswoman Terry Sewell. She had to go vote. All right. We'll have more time with other folks. When she returns, we'll get her in. A community organizer and voting rights activist, the co-founder of Black Votes Voters Matter, the great LaTosha Brown. A Tennessee state representative representing parts of Nashville and a nationally recognized champion of racial justice, and a man from Vanderbilt University. What up? The Honorable Justin Jones. And finally, the Chief Policy Officer of the Southern Poverty Law Center and SPLC Action Fund, LaShawn Warren. All right, let's get right to this. We had an extraordinary panel. We've got another extraordinary one for here in the second go round. So, Congresswoman Plaskett, we know that to get anything done in Congress, you're going to have to be extremely pragmatic. You got to be able to compromise to a certain degree, and you must work with folks on the other side of the aisle. Can you give us words of advice for you, for your colleagues in Congress, and what words of hope do you have for those who have to fight those kind of internecine squabbles and battles as we look ahead for the work that still needs to be done?
Wow, you really going deep on me. I, you do have to be pragmatic in Washington, and I think the genius and the ability of the president that we have now, President Biden, in getting such transformational legislation done in the last year and a half is because of that pragmatism and that ability to quietly bring together the desires and the needs of disparate groups and draw them together. We were able to do that under the leadership of Speaker Nancy Pelosi by understanding carrots. She understood, mother of five, carrots and sticks very well on how to bring people and their needs to be able to do that. Unfortunately, Professor, that's not something that's happening right now. And the leadership of the majority are unable to bring sticks to those and instead is giving them carrots. We're seeing that right now as you speak, where there was a vote yesterday, several held out of his majority, and a rule, which is a mechanism by which we're able to vote on major pieces of legislation, failed. So what did he do? He gave those 5 carrots. And so now what we are seeing is legislation that is in fact not pragmatic, not about the larger group, not about negotiation, but out of fear. And I think that ultimately His fear of losing speakership, his fear of, as you called him, the orange mirage, and his fear of that vocal group that were the insurrectionists is causing him to do what he's doing. So until he is removed and the brother from Brooklyn put in, I don't think we're going to see much use of pragmatism in this Congress.
Yeah, excellent, excellent distinctions there, and a critical word, because dealing with going across the aisle doesn't mean the surrender of principle in deference to a kind of convenience and expediency. So thank you for that. Sister Brown, last time I saw you, we were at the Vice President's crib spitting with Lil Wayne. A milli, a milli, a milli, a milli. Okay. But you are a renowned and legendary activist when it comes especially to voting. You're also running a tremendous program at Harvard that we had the opportunity to see up close. You're an extraordinary activist and agent of change. When it comes to voting, we see the retrenchment, we see the arguments between constitutional demands, states' rights, the gerrymandering, which is rigging the voting, state legislators, especially Republicans, who are redrawing a map with strange geography. It can be overwhelming, especially to younger folk, young person like Brother Jones notwithstanding, who think, my God, why even try? Because it's hooked up, it's rigged from the very beginning. Give us a word of insight from your extraordinary experiences about what we can do to strengthen the vote and to make sure that we use it in a way that is productive for our interests.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. I wanted to sing that because I want to bring the spirit of who we are in the room. Because it ain't started with us. The fact that we are in this room right here is because there was somebody not only singing that song, but I want you to hear the words of the song. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I'm saying that because we really have to recognize that this isn't about centering the other folk. We have to center ourselves in our power. And in this country, power is not something that is earned. You can work as hard as you want to. You've got to take power in this country. And I'm raising this because we're operating in this context, in this political context, like we're not fighting for our very lives. If there were brothers and sisters that literally were denied the right to read, to write, they were denied their own humanity, how in the world can we sit here and talk about how hard it is? Right there, we don't even have the luxury or the privilege to be able to say that coming from where our ancestors have come. And so I'm raising this because some way we have forgotten who we are. And so I am hoping in this moment that literally we recognize that it's never been just strategy that has freed Black folks. It has been our spirit. It's been the spirit of resistance. It's been the spirit of us organizing. It has been the spirit of us radically reimagining something that we had never seen or felt before. It has been the spirit of us literally connecting with our people, recognizing that every single thing that I do, that at the end of the day, even a duck got enough sense to take care of his children, right? That we have to fight for our children like if it's going to be me or you, it's going to be you, because it ain't going to be me. And so I'm saying this because of that kind of fire that we actually got to tap into in our bodies, that we got to elevate our conversations, that we can't keep responding to what they want. I don't give a damn what they want. It is around what is it that we want for our people? What are the policies we need? How do we actually organize that? There are three things I'll say. One, Black folk, you need to move to the South. I know y'all like New York and California, those places, but you need to move to the South. We got the numbers, we got the people, we got the spirit of resistance. The second thing is you need a political home. This is not the moment that even though I'm a commentator on MSNBC, don't get your information just off on TV and opinions. That you have got to get a political home that you're a part of, whether that's the Lawyers Committee, whether that's NAACP, whether that's Black Voters Matter.
You have to join or be a part of something that literally is going to help you shape the paradigm of how you're thinking about politics within the context of blackness. The third thing I'm going to say is we can give all these white folks money for our shoes, our clothes, all the things that we're doing. You need to have a budget, a political budget. Call it your freedom fund. So create a freedom fund so that you are actually supporting your liberation. How can you support those that are trying to oppress you, yet you will not put money aside to fight for your own liberation? So those are three things that I think that we can do that are practical level things that we can do. He's good to know you. Yes, he is.
Speak! My God. All right. That's the Reverend Dr. Latasha Brown, in case y'all did not know that. Fannie Lou Hamer meets Martin Luther King Jr. meets Ella Baker. Another tremendous and insightful person here, Brother Jones, Representative Jones. That great school of Vanderbilt, we produce some great people, and this is one of our greatest graduates. Now, you, along with Justin Pearson and another of your colleagues from Tennessee 3, but you two most famously stood in the gap, translated ideal to reality and theory to practice, and engaged the nation in an imaginative, if you will, tour of what democracy looks like. You stood for the truth. You weren't nasty or belligerent. You were insistent and strong. Talk to us about the necessity of continuing, as Sister Brown said, a tradition that we have inherited and what it looks like in this generation as you extend that trajectory.
Definitely. Thank you so much for allowing me the platform to speak, not for myself, but for the people in Tennessee who are still fighting to protect kids and not guns, to fight for democracy, because we went to the well because democracy requires disruption. We faced a state legislature that was willing to ban books and ban history and then even tried to ban Black lawmakers. But they would not ban the assault weapons that are terrorizing our community. We said, will you ban assault weapons? And they chose to stand in the tradition of their forefathers, their foreparents who founded the Klan in Pulaski, Tennessee, and decided to try and make a public exhibition, a spectacle, an expulsion, they called it. But what they really set into motion was the beginning of a process to expel that system of white supremacy from the people's house. I come here as the youngest Black lawmaker because when they expelled us, they were trying to send a message to other young people, don't step out of your place. And there are members of my own caucus who said, go up there and apologize to them. And we said, they need to apologize to the people, to the families of that elementary school where those babies were killed. They need to apologize. And so what we are seeing now is a system in which I've told young people, we are going to these chambers not to make friends, but to make change. My first week in the legislature, I was in the elevator, had my suit, was excited to go to committee. And my welcome to the legislature was State Senator Jack Johnson, out of nowhere, just telling me, without me even talking to him, you know you're worthless and you don't belong here. We have members who this year, in 2023, said we should bring back hanging by a tree as a form of capital punishment. We see what we're up against. And so, again, democracy requires disruption. We went to the well of the House. We walked forward because our people were being pushed back. The young people were being pushed back. I pulled a megaphone out of my pocket because they shut off the microphone. They refuse to see us as equal. And so every day I get in there, I want to remind them that I'm not here as your intern, I'm here as your colleague. I'm here to give voice to the most diverse district in Tennessee. And so if that means they're going to take a title, they can't take away our purpose of why we're there. They can't take away the wisdom of my mentors, people like Diane Nash, who said that power only shows itself when it has to. And so them expelling us shows that they were threatened by what we were doing and that we have power and that we need to change the system where in my state, 70% of the seats in the legislature were unchallenged in the last election. No one ran against these folks who've been there longer than I've been alive. We have a legislature who, before they expelled us, they broke our congressional district, one county, Nashville, into 3 congressional districts. And for the first time since the Civil War, we have Republican representation. They passed a law to cut our city council in half. And then they tried to take away my constituents' voice at the state level. We see this as strategic. We see what is happening, that when they say we want to take this nation back, they're taking us back to a time we don't want to go to. But we know that we also stand in tradition. A tradition that says that you may have dominant authority in this house. You call yourself a supermajority, but you don't have ultimate authority. And it takes us realizing that we are not the minority party, we are the opposition party. We are the voice to check their power. We're there to be a speed bump to stop this madness of trying to drive our whole state off the cliff. Because to the white folks in Tennessee, I've told them once and I'll tell them again, we are fighting for your children too. When we pass common sense gun laws, we're fighting for your children too. When we're fighting to expand Medicaid, we're fighting for your children too. When we're fighting for well-funded public schools, we're fighting for your children too.
Right. Amen.
And so I'll end by just saying this. I think that I've heard Southern segregationists had a saying, they said the South will rise again. And I come here as a witness to a different type of resurrection that says the South will rise anew. A new South is rising that is multiracial, multi-generational. And that is what we represent. And that is why they're fighting with everything in their being to stop us, but they can't stop what God has already claimed. There's something happening in the South, something happening in a city where young people rose up before to birth a movement. There would be no civil rights movement without Nashville. Let's be honest. And so I will say that there's a legacy of liberation once again rising in Nashville, and that we are a people of progress. Power to the people.
Yeah. Get the spirit up in here now. Pass the plate. Thank you so much for that. Very powerful. And we need young people like this. And we need to support young people like this to make sure that our traditions remain alive. Thank you so much, Representative Jones. Sister Warren, here we are in the midst of an extraordinary assault upon American democracy. You know, they ask black people all the time about, it's always January 6th for us. Because it ain't never been the fact that white brothers and sisters of certain pedigree have not wowed it out and resisted the fundamental exercise of freedom and democracy. We saw what happened after enslavement with the 12 years officially of Reconstruction, and then the redemptionist period that Professor Crenshaw spoke about. White supremacy has been weaponized. What can lawmakers do to deal with domestic terrorism? First of all, by acknowledging it existing. And it has been said the greatest threat, finally, to American democracy. And given the extraordinarily important work that you do in the center that you represent does, what can we do to support those efforts?
Thank you for that question. And good morning, everyone. I'm so honored to be on this panel. I want to first thank Congresswoman Sewell and Horsford and the president of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Nicole Austin Hillary, for their extraordinary leadership, and the entire CBC delegation, because they hold the line for us every day.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in the fight for us every day. I want to begin by saying a few words about my organization. For over 50 years, we have been working to root out racial discrimination and to expose white supremacy and combat that throughout the country. It is still present and alive. If there's nothing else that January 6th taught us, that is that democracy is not a foregone conclusion. We have to fight for it. It is incumbent upon us to get in the fight, to expose nationalism, to expose white supremacists, and to do whatever we can to root it out and actually abolish it in its entirety. Now, there are a couple of things that I think is important as we look at this moment. One, the one thing that I think is incredibly important for us is to understand that in this democracy, everyone doesn't have equal access. We all don't have the power to vote equally, particularly Black and Brown people. And there are efforts afoot to make sure that our power is reduced, and we can't have that. And we have to know that we are in a fight. One of the things that I want to do is share with you the story of my aunt, because I think it speaks powerfully to the moment that I believe that we're in with respect to the crisis of our democracy. She is 80 years old and she lives in Savannah, Georgia. And in the 2022 election, she decided she wanted to participate in this election. She has never missed an election. She's over 80 years old and she struggles with arthritis. And because this election was so incredibly important to her, she said, I'm going to vote early. So she went to her polling place. And when she got there, the line was out the door and around the building. But the important point of this was that was not the general line. That was the line for seniors and people who needed assistance. She told me that there were young people who had to stand in place of seniors who were physically unable to stand in line for that long. She stood in line for over an hour in order to vote. Now, the question is, why in 2022 is there an 80-year-old woman having to stand in line for over an hour to vote? I'm so glad you asked that question. So in 2021, one of the things that the Georgia State Legislature did was they passed SB 202, and that law made it much more difficult for people to vote. In fact, what it did was it shrunk early voting and runoff elections. And that made it made the lines longer, which means that she had to stand in line. In this day and in this era, we should not have our seniors standing in line for 80 years old, standing in line for an hour in order to vote. That is completely unacceptable. Now, one of the things that I think is incredibly important, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, is there is a through line. The same people who are working to oppress voting participation, who are passing this heinous laws, Georgia wasn't the only state. There were states across the South who were passing laws to make it more difficult to vote. And at the Southern Poverty Law Center, we know a little bit about discrimination down there. It is happening in every facet of American life. And it's important for us to not look at these kinds of situations in isolation. We have to connect the dots. It is not just voting. It's that the same people who are trying to oppress the right to vote are the same people who are going after diversity and inclusion. The same people who are challenging affirmative action. They're the same communities that are going after immigration. They are going after everything. And I think we as a people have to see the intersectionality of all of these issues. When CRT is attacked, we have to stand up. When we see that there are voter suppression laws, we have to stand up, and we cannot see them as isolated incidents. We have to work together, and only working together can we combat these issues.
Excellent, excellent. Already, we've got a time limit here, so I want to give each of you a couple of minutes to just summarize for us the significant central thing that we can do to strengthen democracy for our people. And I'll start this way, and I know that Sister Brown already answered, so we'll put you last so you can add on to what you said. But I'll begin with Representative Plaskett. What is the central thing, a significant single thing that we can do to strengthen democracy for our people?
Well, I think it's summarized in so many of the words that I heard here. Fight, disruption, organized an organized movement of disruption. I'll give you an example. As I said earlier, I sit on this new committee that was created by the members of the other side of the aisle, the Republicans, the Select Committee on the Weaponization of Government. And this committee's purpose is to do the groundwork for the dismantling of the actions of the Department of Justice, the FBI, to make people distrust our institutions, also to be a sounding board to determine if conspiracy theories, misinformation catch hold with people. My job as the lead Democrat there, and I have to thank Hakeem Jeffries for putting me in that position because there's 8 of us and most of them are more senior than me, but he asked me to be the lead is because I am willing to be disruptive. We have rules in the House about decorum and how we act. Individuals have their minute, their 5 minutes, and nobody interrupts them. But because we've decided we're going to be the truth squad, I don't allow their bullshit lies. So if they say something that's not truthful, I'm going to stop them. Nah, no. That's not the truth. That's a lie. It's not going to happen while I'm sitting right here next to you. Now, Jim Jordan don't like that.
Right.
My mere presence, and I make sure that I come in all 6 feet of me with 3-inch heels and stand over him before he sits down, right? Let him know you won't sit first. But to be disruptive, to not accept it, to not play their game. We cannot continue to operate in the confines of the rules that they have constructed for us, for our behavior. We have got to set the rules ourselves. Because let me tell you, the people of the Virgin Islands don't have the right to vote for president. When we became part of the United States, territories were always eventually become a state. Wyoming, Montana, the others. When they started making territories with brown people and black people, they put up a law, Supreme Court ruling by the same justice who wrote Plessy v. Ferguson that said that the people who live in territories are alien races who cannot understand Anglo-Saxon principles of law. Therefore, we should not be able to vote. Never mind the fact that someone who comes from my island of St. Croix was Alexander Hamilton who helped write that law, right? But if y'all don't keep your right to vote, we will never get a right to vote.
Right.
So we want to fight for you more than some of y'all want to fight for yourself.
Yes.
Disrupt.
Thank you.
Set your own rules.
Right. Yes. Bullshit, an ancient Greek term that means tomfoolery meets chicanery. Spoken like a true Brooklynite. And speaking of Brooklyn, the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton has just joined us here. And the Reverend Dr. Mark Morial, the great leader of the Urban League, 2 of our great black leaders, and American leaders. We're glad to have you. We got 3 minutes left. Let's turn to Representative Jones and Sister Warren. Tell us very briefly what it is, the single thing we can do to help democracy for our people. And then we'll end with Sister Brown.
I think one thing that we have to be alert to is to not fall for their tactics of deflection, deception, and distraction. This week, people were debating what people wear on the Senate floor. We are fighting for democracy. We don't care about how people dress. And so we cannot fall for these distraction tactics. We have to recenter what is happening on the fact that we are facing authoritarianism in this nation. Because people can vote, but what we're seeing is this old strategy of once we're voted in, they are ousting lawmakers, as we saw in Florida with the state attorney, as we saw what happened in Tennessee. They're censuring them. In our House, they passed a new rule during special session. I see one of my colleagues here, and I was the only one who they enforced against, where they can vote on the House floor to make you not speak for the rest of the session. And so they're instituting new rules to even once we're elected, they're suppressing the voice of democratically elected representatives. This is authoritarianism. If it was happening anywhere else in the world, we would be condemning it. but it's happening right here. And so my challenge to the president and to this administration, come to the South and have a summit on democracy in the South before we go abroad. Let's talk about what's happening in our own nation, where people are attacking democracy and silencing the voice of the people. This is a real threat, and that's what is at stake, is will we have a democracy for those generations who are coming up after us? And that's why we have to fight with whatever we have. We have to vote, but we have to go to these chambers, as they did in my state, and shut these chambers down. We had mothers and teachers and clergy come to the Capitol, fill up the rotunda, sue the speaker over his rules where he said you can't bring a piece of paper into committee, but you can bring a gun. Because what they're doing is instigating a civil war where they're making it easier. They're proliferating weapons of war on our street, and they're making it harder to vote our most powerful nonviolent means of social change. Think about what's going on. They want violence, and January 6th was their dress rehearsal, and we have to be alert to let them know that we know what's up, and that we're not going to fall for these tactics to deceive the people and to distract us. But we see with clear-eyed, with moral clarity, and with fierce urgency that we have to act with boldness and do things out of the ordinary in such a time as this.
All right, we got a minute left for these two powerhouses. Yes, ma'am, William.
Yes, okay. So I think it's important for people to recognize that all of these attacks, it's no accident that they're happening at a time when our country is most diverse. We need to keep that in the forefront of our mind. That is no accident. But there are three things. I know you said one, but there are three things that people can do. One is educate yourself.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves because those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And that can help inform how we move forward. The second is vote. But not only vote, hold the elected officials accountable. And then lastly, build. We don't have the luxury of just reacting to what other people are doing. We have to put out fires. So in one arm have our fire extinguisher and the other nails, hammer, and lumber to build the kind of world that will help our people not only survive, but thrive.
Thank you. Excellent. Mr. Brown, take us on.
You know, it's not just about what they want, because I think sometimes we're too focused on whoever the they is. It is a question of what it is that we want. And I ask people often to close their eyes and imagine what would America look like without racism. And I want you all to do that when you go home. Right? Many of us have never been asked that question. We have to use our radical reimagination. We're creative, y'all. Our creativity is not just for our entertainment or for other folks' entertainment. We have to be creative to think about what systems are going to serve us. For the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize and radically reimagine the kind of America that we desire and that we deserve.
Amen. Give it up to Representative Plaskett, to Sister Brown, to Justin Jones, Representative, and for Sister Warren. God bless them. Give them all some mad love that they give us now. Finally, this morning, we have another special message, and the messenger is well known to you all. To introduce him, I'll just quote what Mayor Eric Adams said a few days ago in presenting him with the key to the city of New York. Despite all of his successes, he has never forgotten where he came from, giving back to New York City, donating millions to underserved communities, and supporting aspiring Black entrepreneurs. I thought I told you we weren't going to stop. I thought I told you we weren't going to stop. Sean Diddy Combs, welcome him to this roster.
Hello, good morning, everybody. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. How you doing, Tish? How's everybody doing? So many revolutionaries in here. The work that you do is so important, so important. You know, I'm on the other side of it, trying to come through the door of making sure we get economic fairness and equality in the fight that y'all fight for, just all of us in as black people, and also just our overall community. We need y'all and we appreciate y'all. And I just wanted to come and say thank you. Thank you very much. And I look forward to talking about solutions and getting to solutions. I love what I'm hearing about disruption. It's important to disrupt. It's important to reimagine. God bless y'all and have a beautiful week. Now, y'all don't just clap. We need everybody ready for battle. They're trying to stop black businesses. You know what's happening with the sisters in Atlanta. And Puffy won't talk about it, but y'all know I'm gonna disrupt. I'm gonna talk about it. They are not doing him right in the spirits industry. Mark Morial and I are gonna talk to you more about it when he's not there. But we've got to support our own. I've seen Puffy give away millions of dollars on the front line anytime we call them. When it's time for us to be on the front line for them, we shouldn't be apologetic. Am I right? So don't take a picture, make a picture. Let's get out there and go to war. I wasn't on the program, but I am the program.
Y'all heard it right here. Disruption. So motivating. More to come.